Now, if you're at all active on social media, in particular on Twitter, where, by the way, you should be following me, that's at Dragonfire Ideas on twitter.com, you might have noticed in your trending topics, numerous times lately, atheism in your trending topics. Do not be alarmed if you've noticed this. Honestly, I kind of think that, I think that it's a concentrated effort, by several atheist groups to try to pump themselves up in the, in the public eye. I don't actually kind of look at this as a sort of thing that's at all genuine or organic. I think probably there's a lot of bots being used to push this thing. But that's just a theory. I can't prove it. In fact, it doesn't even really rise to the level of a theory. It's just more like a suspicion. So keep that in mind. But the funny thing is that as I was kind of plotting out the topics for this week's podcast, after the last few podcasts, I actually wanted to make a point of trying to say something positive about atheists. And unfortunately, they just keep giving me, the internet atheists just keep giving me too much reason, to not do it. And so in particular, I want to talk about something that took place over this, over the time off that I took from the podcast. I decided to take July off. And there was some crazy stuff that took place in the interim. In particular, one of the big things that happened was that the United States Supreme Court made the decision that they were going to strike down Roe versus Wade, which basically sent the entire pro-abortion movement into a mode of woe is me, because they didn't really like the idea of individual states being able to decide their own abortion laws. They liked the idea of a bunch of people in New York being able to kind of push down, the abortion laws that they wanted in Texas, or in Alabama, or in Georgia. And now that Roe versus Wade, which was the Supreme Court decision that had basically argued that the right to access to an abortion was a human right in the United States, now that that's been struck down, there's all sorts of different laws all over the United States that have now taken effect. And actually some of them, I'm personally not really in favor of abortion. I am personally in favor of women having the right to choose an abortion. And I happen to think that the best thing, for lack of any better phrases, is a metaphor for those who are, for those people out there who are crazy, who might watch this podcast segment. But for lack of any better metaphor, the best weapon that people who do not favor abortion have against it is actually ethics. If you teach people that there are better options better options in abortion, and if you successfully make the case that human life is valuable, in almost any form, rather I should say in every form, well then you will have far, far more women not choosing abortion. But I think it's actually very important that they have the right to choose or not to choose. After all, the bodily autonomy argument is not really so simple as what the pro-abortion movement would tell you, but it is very much a factor. It just so happens that it's not really a matter of just one body. And so as it relates to that second body, to the unborn human body that is growing inside the mother, upon, conception, there seemed to be an argument that seemed to be very, very popular, amongst internet atheists. And that was this extremely bizarre argument that the unborn human child is a parasite. And that basically it didn't have to be valued as a form of human life because, well, for one thing, many of them don't even want to recognize it as human, which is, quite frankly, just biologically, from a biological standpoint, that's all kinds of wrong. But it was almost like they needed to find, the argument that would actually kind of provoke the most revulsion towards the unborn human fetus as they could manage, and that was basically to describe it as like a parasite. Really not that different from a tapeworm, huh? I mean, despite the fact that when you look up the scientific definition of a parasite, it is quite specific about this. It is an organism that is not of the same species as its host, that basically steals enters the body and steals nutrients from the from the larger organism. And so, to make this argument, they want to make the case that, first of all, the mother is a host, rather than a mother, and then secondly, that this second body has infiltrated the mother's body from outside of the body. And neither of those things are true. And so from the scientific perspective, it is literally factually false to try to make the argument that the unborn human fetus is a parasite. And you would think that for a whole bunch of people that love to talk about science, as much as internet atheists do, that the fact that science has already basically stipulated that, hey, the unborn fetus of any one particular species cannot be a parasite upon that particular species. You would think the people who love to talk about science as much as internet atheists do would accept that. But oddly enough, when you make this argument to them, they don't do that at all. As a matter of fact, they do the other thing. They double down. And they insist, it's like, no, that's a wrong, that's the wrong definition. And then they go up someplace and they try to find a less specific definition where the of another species is left out, and say, it's like, okay, nope, this is the definition. It's like, well, geez. I would say that if you have two differing definitions, one of them is an actual scientific definition and the other one is just someplace that you dug up someplace else on the internet, I would have to say that the one established by science probably ought to be the one that we go with here. But the longer that these conversations go on, the more aggressive and more insistent these internet atheists become about trying to make this argument, and that's where it actually becomes entirely undeniable what this argument actually is. They will sit there and they will come to you and they will try to pose it to you as if it's a scientific argument. But the truth is, it's nothing of the sort. It's not a scientific argument. It's an emotional argument. And so when you compromise that argument, they become extremely emotional. More specifically, they become extremely angry. And the more that they realize that they're wrong, the angrier that they become. Which actually tells you probably more that you need to know about the common internet atheist, who, by the way, I don't actually think that I don't even think they're really representative of the broader body of atheists. I think that I think that they're a very small portion of them, but as it relates to the specific segment of atheists, these internet atheists, there's a kind of a public perception, and this is actually verified by various studies, that the public perception of atheists is that they're kind of narcissistic. But as you dig into arguments like this, it actually kind of shows you that in the case of the modern internet atheist, narcissism is not really the mental condition that you would most readily use to describe them. I would say that the mental condition that you would most readily attribute to the modern internet atheist is actually oppositional defiance disorder. Because the more that you dig into these things, the more apparent it becomes is that they never really adopted this as a scientific argument. I mean, we've already established that. This is actually something that a lot of them adopted because they think that it upsets people to hear this. There's a certain segment of people that they enjoy upsetting, and they think that this is the argument that upsets them. And that's why they flock to this way. So just keep this in mind. If you happen to be the kind of person who is predisposed to confront this kind of bullshit and to argue with it, the most powerful weapon that you have in your arsenal is your refusal to give these people what they want. And the longer that you refuse to give these people what they want, the more that it upsets them. And honestly, having dealt with a few of these people, I can't think of a nicer bunch of people for this to happen to.